But let's jump right off from there and talk about race in the media with our next table. Let me do our introductions. Welcome back to the show, Doug Moore from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, covering diversity and culture for the paper. Also with us, Aaron Williams from St. Louis Public Radio, a producer for NPR just across the driveway here. We appreciate you being here. And Michael Murray, University of Missouri St. Louis, journalism professor. I tell you what, let me throw some terms and some names out there when we're talking about race in the media. We have, of course, Mr. Martin, Trayvon Martin. We have some stuff going on in Arkansas with a young man who was shot locally. We have school transfers. We have a lot of things that seem to have race involved in them. Also, the Missouri State Fair, we can't forget about here recently. Are we wrong to read race into these issues, or is that what's going on?
I feel that the media tries to remain as objective as possible. We focus on what is news and what is happening and what is going on. And from that, the response of what the public gives is how things continue to happen.
I think a lot of these stories, they're recurring in a sense. I can remember as an undergraduate student here at St. Louis University doing a program about black guys on campus who were being kind of hassled by the campus police. And this is like 30, 40 years ago. And the issue only came to mind because one of my friends, his older brother was president of the Association of Black Collegians, and he sort of told me that this was going on. And I got some compliments from my professors about how we did it and just talking about it. But when you mentioned Trayvon Martin, I thought, the way I've thought about this is it's kind of been a recurring issue. It's sort of the same issue. It's an identity issue to a great extent. And I think it's more complicated today because black broadcasters, for example, we were just talking about this, so many of them have become so prominent, like Gwen Ifill, and we were talking about Byron Pitts. And I've had a chance to interview some of these people over the years, and frequently they don't identify as much as a black reporter as much as they do just trying to be a good reporter. So it makes it in some ways a little bit more complicated to attack the problem today, but I think talking about it does a lot.
I think that we can't push race to the side, though. I think with the school transfer issue particularly, I mean, it doesn't take long for you, if you're watching TV at night, to see that the kids getting off of those buses are primarily black, going to schools that are primarily white. And the schools that are failing are schools where they're mainly black kids. And we saw the picture in the Post-Dispatch of the mother standing up at a meeting, a white mom, saying that we can't have this. We moved away from this. We're going to have to put these metal detectors in our schools. And
that woman I know has defended herself, saying it wasn't about race. But go ahead.
But how can it not be? I mean, how can we not have that conversation? Because those are the kids that are going to come in, and that's, if you're saying we need metal detectors, why? Because we're bringing black kids into the school? I mean, in this case, Riverview Gardens and Normandy equals black students. So it is about race, and you just have to put it out there.
Let's broaden this out a little bit, just beyond our local news media or national news media. Talk about other types of media. We heard some comments there from the young folks. How does that play into our perceptions of race when we look at what we are seeing and hearing culturally?
Well, I think the good news as far as today is that a lot of times the media outlets are kind of reconsidering what they're doing, or reviewing what they do, or what they used to call a second-day story, where they'll do a follow-up. So in the last few days, for example, there was a big shootout down here, and I know your station, your other station, Channel 5, went back and interviewed some of the people involved and said, number one, these people who were involved in that weren't from this area. Number two, it's very safe. Then the it was a woman, alderman, talked about how this was portrayed initially at the station. So I think the benefit of talking about it is you get people thinking more about what are the key issues and how can we expand our views about what's actually going on. So to be able to talk about the situation with the school districts, I think we've come a long way. It used to be, it was just sort of out there and you had to digest it on your own. Now we've got these opportunities to kind of revisit how things have been presented. So I think that's a plus.
That is a plus, revisiting and continuing to bring in additional voices that aren't just black or aren't just white. There are more than two races that live in the city, and there are more than two races that are affected by what is going on. And like you said, going back and having continuing stories and furthering the narrative helps us to continue to learn more about it.
I know in Melville, when we talked about the diversity issues in the transfer story, he was the superintendent, Dr. Eric Kanosh, was quick to point out that he has students speaking 50 different languages when they go home. So there is a lot more than just a black and white issue, as you were talking about.
Right.
Can we get any historical perspective quickly? We just have about 30 seconds. When we look back at the footage Jim was showing, were things covered differently for the Jefferson Break protest?
Things were covered differently in the sense that the media, mostly the network news operations, started to target civil rights as soon as it became a federal issue. So I think that's largely misunderstood. That people think that, oh, the St. Louis media wasn't covering the story. It may be true that they weren't, but that was pretty typical. Unless the story was really ugly, as it became, in the Deep South, and unless the federal government stepped in, it mostly wasn't covered. But I've talked to people who were involved in that, and they said that's one of the real downsides of our current era is people don't remember how ugly a story that was, and that isn't really taught very well.